Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia. At a dinner, my mom, Margaret, leaned across the table, her eyes sharp and unblinking, and snarled, "Your success means nothing. Anna's the only daughter who matters." My fork froze midair. For years, I had learned to swallow the bitterness, to nod politely while they worshipped Anna for the tiniest scraps of achievement. But something inside me snapped that night. I set my fork down, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "Then watch me cut you out forever." The silence that followed was deafening. Anna, my sister, smirked, basking in the glow of being their golden girl. They thought I'd stay quiet as always. They thought I'd keep playing the role of the invisible daughter. But what came next didn't just shatter their perfect image of family. It burned it to the ground. Before I take you back to where it all began, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happened after that dinner changed everything. It wasn't always like this. At least that's what I told myself when I was younger, trying to make sense of why my parents only seemed to see Anna. If Anna was the sun, then I was the shadow, useful only to prove how brightly she shone. I still remember being 9 years old, clutching a tiny plastic trophy I'd won from the school spelling bee. I walked into the living room, cheeks red with excitement, heart pounding with hope. I thought maybe, just maybe, Margaret and Richard would beam at me the way they did with Anna. My dad glanced up from his newspaper, muttered a distracted, "That's nice, sweetheart," and went back to reading. My mom didn't even look up from the kitchen counter where she was helping Anna with finger paints. That same week, Anna painted a crooked rainbow in art class. Margaret hung it in the living room like it was a Monet, called the neighbors over to admire it, and bragged about her little artist. I stood there staring at that crooked rainbow, the colors bleeding outside the lines, and felt my own victory evaporate into nothing. Birthdays told the same story. Mine were functional, stripped of joy: a plain cake from the discount bakery, a card with a $20 bill, clothes a size too big. I never complained, but I felt the emptiness with every forced smile. Anna's birthdays were explosions of balloons and laughter-themed cakes, and wrapped boxes stacked like she was royalty. At 13, I got a used bike with chipped paint and squeaky brakes. At 10, Anna got a brand new laptop in a shiny white box, her name carved on the case. I asked my mom why Anna always got more, always got better. Margaret looked at me the way someone might look at a child who'd asked why the sky was blue and said, "She's special, Sophia. Don't be jealous." Those words carved themselves into me like a brand on my skin. She's special. You're not. Even in school, where I tried to outrun the shadow, their favoritism followed me. I was the kid who brought home straight A's, whose name was printed on honor rolls year after year. Richard would nod vaguely. Good job, before changing the subject to Anna's potential. Potential, such a dangerous word. She could scrape by with C's and still be praised for trying. Margaret threw pizza nights when Anna passed math after failing the first 2 quarters, while my academic medals gathered dust in a drawer. Sometimes I thought my achievements embarrassed them, as though my independence proved they were unnecessary parents. So they leaned harder into Anna, making her dependence a badge of honor and my resilience a quiet indictment. At family dinners, when relatives asked how we were doing, Richard and Margaret's eyes always flicked to Anna. "Anna's ballet recital is next week. She's so talented," Margaret would gush, while Richard chimed in about her leadership in group projects. Meanwhile, I sat there, spoon in hand, silent, chewing food that tasted like cardboard. I learned to disappear in plain sight, invisible at my own table. And yet, inside, a part of me ached for their approval so badly it kept me awake at night. I'd lie in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, whispering to myself, "If I just work harder, if I just get better, maybe they'll finally see me." But the harder I tried, the more invisible I became. When I was 15, I got my first job at a diner, wiping tables, pouring coffee, coming home reeking of grease and exhaustion. I saved for months to buy a secondhand phone, proud of every blister that earned it. 2 days later, Anna complained her case didn't match her outfits, and Margaret whisked her off to buy the newest iPhone, complete with accessories. My hands shook as I held my battered phone, but I said nothing. By then, silence was my second skin. At 16, I scraped together tips and bought a beat-up Toyota with 180,000 miles on it. The muffler rattled so loudly the whole block could hear me coming. I parked it proudly in the driveway until Anna's Sweet 16 rolled around. That night, a red bow glittered under the porch light. A brand new Jeep, spotless and gleaming, stood like a monument to her golden status. The pictures made it to Facebook, smiling faces, champagne glasses, Anna's arm draped around Richard and Margaret. My Toyota sat 3 houses down, hidden by shadows, because I couldn't bear to hear her friends laugh at me. Even in college, the pattern held. I stayed up late working 2 jobs writing scholarship essays until dawn, just to afford tuition. My parents' advice, don't expect too much help, Sophia. College is expensive. But when Anna decided on a private arts academy with a $40,000 tuition bill, Margaret and Richard took out loans. Hired consultants told her, "Don't worry, baby, we'll handle it." They handled everything: her rent, her clothes, her gas. By then, the truth was impossible to ignore. Anna had learned to fall, knowing someone would always catch her. I had learned to stand alone because no one would. And maybe in a cruel, twisted way, that difference shaped us perfectly. Anna polished herself for applause hollow inside. I forged myself in silence, my worth invisible to them, but undeniable to me. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was the daughter they underestimated into strength. Graduation day was supposed to be the moment everything finally made sense. 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts, and a GPA that never slipped below perfection. I thought walking across that stage would prove something, that even if my parents never celebrated me, they'd at least show up. I reserved 3 front-row seats, wrote their names on the little slips, Margaret, Richard, Anna. The week before, I called Margaret. She said in her honey-sweet voice, "Of course, honey. We wouldn't miss it for the world." Richard even chimed in from the background, "We'll be there." And I believed them. I believed them because some part of me was still that 9-year-old girl with a spelling bee trophy begging for their eyes to finally see me. That morning, as I lined up in the staging area, my phone buzzed. I thought it was a good luck text, maybe a photo of them already waiting with flowers. But the words on the screen didn't feel like English at first. "Can't make it today, sweetie. Anna's got a meeting with a potential investor. This could be huge for her future. We'll celebrate your graduation later. So proud of both our successful girls. XO Mom." I read it 3 times, each word sinking heavier until my stomach felt like lead. I stared at the XO, the false sweetness at the end, as if that erased the fact they had chosen a coffee shop meeting for Anna over the years of sweat I'd poured into this moment. My name was about to be called, and all I could think was, even here, even now, Anna wins. When I stepped onto the stage, applause thundered from the crowd. Families cheered, balloons bounced, bouquets waved in the air. I scanned the seats. The 3 empty chairs I'd saved were like open wounds. No clapping, no smiles, just blank space where love should have been. The dean shook my hand, whispered, "Congratulations, Sophia. Outstanding work." I forced a smile for the camera, my cheeks stiff, my chest hollow. The flashbulb caught me grinning, but I swear if you looked closely, you'd see the grief in my eyes. That photo went into the yearbook, everyone assuming it was pride. Only I knew it was heartbreak. Outside, classmates swarmed their families, laughter and tears spilling into the air. Mothers kissed their children's foreheads. Fathers clapped them on the back. Bouquets of roses, gift bags, camera flashes everywhere. And me, I slipped away, diploma pressed against my chest like it was nothing more than a scrap of paper. I got into my Toyota, the one with the rattling muffler, and set the diploma on the passenger seat. For a moment, I stared at it, at the gold seal gleaming in the sun. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it looked like a participation ribbon. Like all my work, all my sacrifice was just something to be acknowledged politely before the spotlight returned to Anna. On the drive home, I replayed every slight, every dismissal, every "that's nice." Sophia, while Anna was showered in applause. The cracked rainbow painting framed on the wall. The birthdays, the Jeep, the endless excuses. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. Somewhere between the campus parking lot and my lonely apartment, something hardened inside me. I realized I could not keep waiting for validation that was never going to come. Margaret and Richard had made their choice years ago. Anna was their legacy. I was their afterthought. That truth was sharp, cruel, and final. So I made my choice too. From that day forward, I decided I would live for myself, not for their approval, not for their scraps of affection. For me, I would build something so undeniable that when they finally turned around to notice, it would already be too late. That night, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. Instead, I taped my diploma to the bare wall of my apartment right above the mattress I slept on the floor. It hung there, crooked, the tape peeling at the corners, but every time I looked at it, I whispered, "This is mine. No one can take it from me." The girl who once begged for recognition died that day. The woman who would rise in her place was born in silence. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't post an inspirational quote or call anyone for advice. I taped my diploma to the wall above the mattress, set a chipped mug beneath it like an altar, and built a life in the quiet. Mornings smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. Nights tasted like instant noodles and metal fatigue on my tongue. I worked days at my entry-level job until my eyes buzzed with spreadsheet lines, then walked home under the hum of streetlights, opened my second-hand laptop that whined like it might lift off and taught myself the language of money. Cap rates, amortization, contractor bids. I watched videos with paint dust on my hands, paused to scribble formulas on the back of junk mail, and pressed play again. My apartment looked temporary because it was. A mattress, a folding chair, a crate as a nightstand. The Toyota's trunk was my second closet stuffed with work boots and a toolbox I'd found at a yard sale. Every payday, I divided the money like a ritual rent-food bus, pass a sliver for emergencies, and then the envelope I didn't touch. I slid 20s in like prayers. I told myself, no one is coming. Build the net you'll fall into. 6 months in, I found it a sun-bleached for sale sign on a sagging duplex at the edge of town. The porch leaned like a man with a secret. Peeling paint curled off the siding like old scabs. I could smell mildew before the agent even unlocked the door. The kitchen sink coughed rust. One of the bedrooms had a fist-sized hole in the wall and a child's crayon drawing of a blue dog right next to it, cheerful, defiant, obscene against the rot. "It's a lot of work," the agent said carefully, as if work might scare me off. Work was the only thing that never left. I ran numbers on the hood of my Toyota while delivery trucks groaned past purchase price rehab costs rent projections. The math was ugly but not impossible. I didn't have enough saved, so I sat in a credit union with blistered palms and asked for a small loan with the kind of pitch you give when the room isn't on your side. The loan officer looked at my file, the GPA, the entry-level salary, the lack of cosigner, and said, "You're scrappy." I swallowed the sting and took it as a compliment. When the approval came through, I didn't celebrate. I bought 3 gallons of bleach and a box of contractor bags. Weekends turned into a blur of trips to the hardware store where the air smelled like lumber and hope. I learned to lay vinyl plank by failing 4 times on the first room. I wore a headlamp at midnight to patch drywall knees on old towels because I couldn't afford knee pads yet. I learned that a toilet weighs more than whatever pride you thought you had as you wrestle it into place alone. I learned that the sound of a breaker tripping can yank you back to your heartbeat fast enough to taste copper. I learned that no one cares if a girl hauls sheetrock except the old man next door who leaned over the fence and grunted, "Level it from the back, not the face." I thanked him with a 6-pack and wrote his advice on an index card taped over the light switch level from the back. Not everything was noble. I cried into a dust mask once because a pipe burst and sprayed me with cold water and shame. I ate peanut butter with a paint stick when the spoons were buried in a box somewhere. One evening, I fell asleep in the tub in my clothes because I'd meant to rinse off drywall powder and woke up shivering at 3 a.m., hands cramped into claws. But the duplex began to change in small, stubborn ways. The porch straightened with new posts. The mildew smell waned beneath coats of kilts and cheap white paint. Light found the rooms again. The first tenant I placed paid on time for 3 months. I ran my fingertip over the deposit slip like it could bless me. On month 4, the rent didn't come. On month 5, the excuses did sick aunt lost job a boyfriend who would bring cash Friday. Friday became a myth. I read tenant laws with a highlighter, and a knot in my stomach followed the process exactly. And when the sheriff knocked, I stood behind the door, finally understanding why landlords look tired. The unit was a disaster hole's trash, a shattered cabinet like a broken tooth. I sat on the floor and let myself be furious for 1 full minute. Then I started again. I changed how I screened. References, verified, income documented instincts listened to. I put simple rules in writing and kept copies of everything in a blue binder with my name on it because no one else would claim it. I met a contractor named Luis who didn't talk much but taught me how to see straight lines in crooked rooms. I learned to negotiate for materials and to walk away when the numbers didn't respect me. All of it happened in silence. I didn't tell Margaret or Richard about the duplex. I didn't post before and after photos. On the rare Sundays I went home, I smiled and ate whatever was on the table while they held court about Anna's latest inspiration. Her brand colors, her vision board, her pop-up show that needed investors. When I mentioned I'd bought a place, Margaret said, "That's nice, Sophia. Did you hear Anna's studio might do a collab with a boutique?" Richard added, "Real estate is risky." I nodded and asked for the salt. They didn't know I had paint on my cuticles I couldn't scrub out. By the end of that first year, both units were occupied by people I vetted carefully. The rent wasn't life-changing, but it was steady. After the mortgage and repairs, a few $100s remained each month like a secret whispered into my palm. I didn't spend it. I fed it. I refinanced when the numbers worked, not when my ego wanted to brag. I kept driving the Toyota with the rattle no mechanic could fully quiet. I learned to love the thrill of the hardware store clearance aisle more than the idea of new clothes. I skipped vacations. I said no to dinners out. I cooked beans and rice in batches and stored them in plastic takeout containers labeled with blue painter's tape. The discipline wasn't punishment. It was a door. The duplex taught me the rhythm of a building, the way heat settles in certain rooms, the places water wants to travel, the smell of a problem before it becomes visible. It also taught me I could hold a boundary without a scene. I didn't have to beg to be seen in my parents' house. I could build a house that wouldn't care whether they looked or not. When I closed on my second place, a narrow triplex with a staircase that creaked like it was telling secrets, I signed the papers with hands that still bore faint scars. The notary asked if I wanted a celebratory photo. I said no. I walked to my car and sat quietly, palms on the wheel, listening to the engine's familiar stutter. I spoke out loud just once, "Keep going." The portfolio grew the way a bruise fades slowly, then all at once. 3 doors? 5? 6. I learned to spot the listing photos that lied, and the ones that were honest in their ugliness. I learned which neighborhoods were changing not from blogs, but from talking to the woman who ran the corner store and the guy who fixed tires beside the freeway. I learned that spreadsheets tell you where something can work. The block tells you whether it will. I kept my circle small. A banker who respected that, I brought my numbers in clean. Luis, who taught me to ask better questions. The old neighbor, now a friend who used a level like it was prayer. And me, the girl no one clapped for, who wrote checks with a steadier hand each time. At dinner tables where Margaret and Richard bragged about Anna's brand partnerships, I chewed and smiled and let the words float past. I had nothing to prove and nowhere to be seen. Every deed tucked into my blue binder was a louder applause than they ever gave me. My silent counterattack wasn't spite. It was architecture. Brick by brick, I was building the kind of life you can't ignore, especially if you're the ones who tried. The article changed everything. Until then, my victories were private taped diplomas, hidden binders, signed deeds, stacked in a fireproof box no one asked about. But when the City Business Journal ran a feature called Rising Stars in Real Estate with my face on the cover, the silence I'd built shattered. There I was, standing in front of one of my renovated duplex's paint still fresh on the trim, the headline shouting, "Sophia Mitchell, 28, builds $1 million portfolio before 30. I hadn't told Margaret or Richard. I hadn't told anyone in the family. But the article made its rounds faster than wildfire. A coworker tagged me on Facebook. A neighbor slid the magazine under my apartment door. By the time I got home that night, my phone lit up like a warning siren. Richard called first voice, unnaturally warm. "Sophia. We saw the article. Incredible work. We need to talk soon. Your mother and I are so proud." I could hear Margaret in the background coaching him. Then a text from Anna dripping in false casualness. Wow, didn't know you were doing all that. Maybe we could collaborate your properties? My creative brand. We'd be unstoppable. I laughed out loud in my empty kitchen, the sound sharp against the tile. Anna still believed the world would rearrange itself to make her the star. Margaret's message came last. A syrupy honey, this is amazing. Let's celebrate as a family. Call me ASAP. Love you, love you. 2 words she'd rationed my entire life, now tossed like confetti because she needed something. I didn't answer. Not for days. I let their voicemails pile up, the tones of their voices growing more frantic each time. Richard's firm warmth curdled into guilt trips family shouldn't drift apart so. Don't let success blind you. Margaret layered on the melodrama. Your sister's been struggling, you could really lift her up. Anna tried manipulation, sending me screenshots of brand decks with pastel colors and fonts she probably stole off Pinterest. We can merge our talents, she wrote. You handle the boring money stuff, I'll handle the creative. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I begged them to see me. Now they couldn't stop looking. When I finally agreed to dinner, I already knew what it would be. The restaurant was too expensive for their taste chosen, so they could pretend they still had dignity. Margaret wore pearls that didn't hide the worry lines etched deeper around her mouth. Richard kept folding and unfolding the menu like the prices bit him. Anna arrived late, oversized sunglasses hiding her bloodshot eyes. They started with the script. Margaret gushed. We always knew you'd succeed, Sophia. You've always been so independent. Richard nodded. We couldn't be prouder. Truly. Anna slid her laptop across the table, a half-baked PowerPoint glowing with words like synergy and vision. She leaned forward, eager, desperate. If we combine forces, Sophia, I can rebrand your properties. Make them modern. Make them iconic. People will line up. I closed the laptop with one hand. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Then Richard's voice cracked. He leaned in, dropping the pretense. We're in trouble. The business is collapsing. The bank's sending foreclosure notices. We need help, Sophia. Margaret's eyes glistened as she grabbed my wrist. Just a loan, sweetheart. $160,000. We'll pay you back with interest. You wouldn't let your family lose everything, would you? Anna's smirk had vanished. Her hands twisted in her lap like a child awaiting punishment. Sophia, she whispered, if you help us, I'll work for you. For free. I'll prove I can pull my weight. For years, they dangled their love like a prize I could never win. Now, they dangled their ruin hoping I'd pay the ransom. My heart didn't pound with pity. It pulsed with clarity. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch until Richard's jaw tightened and Margaret's grip weakened. For the first time, I saw fear in Anna's eyes, not fear of failure, but fear of me. They thought my success meant nothing. Now, it was the only thing that mattered. I didn't answer them right away. I let the silence breathe until it felt like another guest at the table. Margaret's hand trembled on my wrist, her manicured nails digging in like she could anchor me back to the daughter who used to beg for crumbs. Richard's jaw twitched, his eyes fixed on the table as if the grain of wood might offer a script. Anna's voice cracked in the dead space. Sophia, please, this time it's different. That sentence hit like a cruel déjà vu. My mind threw me back years to my 16th birthday when I came home with grease on my hands and diner tips in my pocket, proud of the rattling Toyota I'd bought myself. Anna had unwrapped a brand new Jeep with a bow bigger than her torso, and Richard had clapped her shoulder saying, this time it's different, she deserves something special. Different always meant Anna. Different always meant me, forgotten. I pulled my hand from Margaret's grip. Do you remember my graduation? My voice was steady, even gentle, though my chest burned. I saved you front row seats. I walked that stage alone while you sat in a coffee shop waiting for Anna's maybe investor. Do you remember telling me my success meant nothing? Margaret's face drained of color. She opened her mouth closed. It opened it again. That was exactly who you are, I cut in. My eyes flicked to Richard. You looked down at your plate then too. pretended it wasn't happening. Anna leaned forward, desperation bleeding through her practiced poise. Sophia, I was young. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to, what my voice sharpened. Didn't mean to smirk when Mom called you the only daughter that mattered. Didn't mean to bask in every sacrifice I made while you threw away every chance you were given. The waiter approached, oblivious, pouring water into glasses that didn't need filling. The clink of ice was the only sound until he left. Margaret tried again, softer this time. We'll pay you back, sweetheart, with interest. We'll sign over the house if that's what it takes. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was the laugh of someone who'd buried her younger self long ago. You had your chance to invest in me. When I needed you, you looked away. Now you want me to rescue you. That ship sailed a long time ago and it's not coming back. Richard's mask cracked. He dropped the calm father act, leaning across the table. You're tearing this family apart, Sophia. The words were almost comical in their hypocrisy. My throat tightened with memories Richard praising Anna's crooked rainbow painting while my spelling bee trophy collected dust. Richard patting her back for passing math while my honor roll certificates piled up unseen. Richard cutting me off mid-sentence at Christmas dinner to gush about Anna's eye for design. I stood, laying cash on the table for my meal. My chair scraped against the floor like a gunshot. I'm not tearing the family apart. You did that years ago when you decided only one child mattered. Their faces blurred behind me as I walked out, Margaret's pale, Richard's red with fury, Anna's twisted in panic. But none of them followed. Maybe they knew the chase was over. Weeks later, I drove past their house, or what used to be their house. The lawn was overgrown weeds curling around the mailbox. A bright yellow foreclosure sticker glared on the front door like a scarlet letter. Boxes were stacked on the porch, weather-warped from rain. Anna stood in the driveway, her once shiny hair scraped into a limp bun, dragging boxes into Richard's dented pickup. The Jeep was gone, repossessed. Margaret shuffled past her, clutching a garbage bag instead of a designer purse. Richard moved slower than I'd ever seen him, shoulders sagging under the weight of failure. I parked across the street, engine idling, hands gripping the wheel. For a fleeting second, I remembered 12-year-old me staring at that framed rainbow painting and wondering why my father couldn't smile at me the way he smiled at Anna. That girl had wanted nothing more than to be chosen, but I wasn't her anymore. In my rearview mirror, I saw my own reflection. 28 hair pulled back, eyes steady, wearing the clothes I bought with my own money, driving the same Toyota that had once embarrassed me. And yet, unlike them, I wasn't broken. I was building. That evening, I unlocked the door to my new house. $900,000 worth of glass steel and space they never imagined I could claim. The pool glittered in the backyard. The skyline sprawled beyond my office window. In the garage, a black Porsche gleamed under the lights bought in cash. Not because I needed it, but because I could. Sometimes Margaret's emails slip through long paragraphs of apologies, promises to change please for one more chance. Richard even showed up once at my office, thinner, older, clutching a folder like it contained redemption. Security walked him out before he reached my desk. Anna posts motivational quotes on Instagram, now photos of cheap coffee cups and captions about reinventing yourself. She works retail, barely making rent. Do I smile? Yes. But not out of cruelty, out of freedom. They always said my success meant nothing. Turns out it was everything because it was the one thing they could never take. My house is quiet in the mornings, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Sunlight crawls across the concrete floor, warm as a hand on my shoulder. I make coffee in the heavy mug I bought at a flea market and open the blue binder that used to live in a fireproof box. The plastic sleeves shine. Deeds, insurance papers, notes scribbled in the margins from nights I thought I might break. There's a post-it I kept from the duplex days curling at the edges with the old neighbor's advice in my handwriting level from the back. I used to think he meant drywall. Now I know he meant everything. Don't chase the glossy front. Make the hidden parts true. On the wall above my desk, the diploma I once taped with shaky hands sits in a proper frame, matte black mitered clean. Beside it hangs a photo. I took my cell phone tilted up hands, visible in the bottom edge, me in paint-splattered jeans, smiling a small private smile outside the first duplex once it was whole. No magazine photographer, no caption, just proof that I stayed. The emails still come sometimes, Margaret's paragraphs that read like a sermon and an invoice. At once Richard's lines reduced to bullet points of regret, Anna's emoticons pasted onto promises. I don't open them anymore. I built a filter named Mitchell Archive and said it once. Choosing not to read is not cruelty. It's choosing not to bleed. The day I made that rule, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was spacious, like moving into a bigger room you've already paid for. I go back once to the campus where I walked alone. Not on a graduation day on a Tuesday when the lawnmowers hum and no one is crying into bouquets. The auditorium smells like cleaner and old wood. An usher lets me step inside for just a minute and I sit where I saved 3 front-row seats years ago. I close my eyes and imagine the noise that should have held me, then the hands that should have clapped. I keep my palms open in my lap, and for the first time I clap for myself. Not loud. Enough. The sound is small against all that space, but it lands exactly where it needed to land. I could have bought my parents' house at auction. The numbers penciled. It would have been easy to stand on that lawn with a cashier's check and prove something ugly. Instead, I stayed home. There are victories that shrink you. I am done getting smaller. The foreclosure sticker, the overgrown grass that was their lesson, not my trophy. What I do buy is a building near the college. 2 floors, nothing fancy scarred hardwood, a kitchen with fluorescent lights, windows that stick when it rains. We sand patch paint Luis, teaching a younger crew the old man's lines about levels and patience. When the dust settles, I sign the first lease under a new program I funded quietly. 3 empty chairs, scholarship housing for first-gen grads. The name stings and soothes at the same time. The students don't know the story behind it. They don't need to. They only need keys that turn and a door that doesn't judge how they got there. On my first Thanksgiving in the new place, I cook too much on purpose. The kitchen smells like butter and thyme and a little bit of burnt pie crust because some rituals are imperfect. I set plates for people who showed up when no one had to. Luis, who still says 3 words when one would do. The loan officer who called me scrappy and meant resilient. The neighbor with the level hands shaking just a little as he lifts his fork. Their laughter fills the rooms I used to walk through alone. No performance. No thrones at the head of the table. Just chairs occupied by people who never asked to be worshipped, only invited. Later, after dishes, I sit outside by the pool, the city lights turning the water into a sheet of moving silver. The Porsche glints in the garage, a toy I don't need a milestone I allowed. The Toyota is parked at the curb, rattling proud as ever. I kept it, not because I'm sentimental, but because I like what it says. When I see both cars at once, I know exactly who drove me here. Sometimes I wonder who I might have become if Margaret had loved me loudly, if Richard had lifted his eyes, if Anna had learned to clap for someone else. There's sadness in the wondering, but it doesn't own me. Love withheld shaped me, yes, but so did every choice I made after I stopped asking for it. There is power in refusing to reenact old hunger. There is dignity in building a life that doesn't require witnesses to be real. I get a letter in the mail with no return address, Anna's handwriting careful and round. Inside a photo of the crooked rainbow painting I used to hate. "Do you remember this?" she wrote. "I think about it a lot. I put the photo on my desk and leave it there for a week, the way you let a bruise bloom so it can fade. Then, I slide it into the binder between a deed and an insurance rider. Not because I want to keep the pain, but because it's part of the structure now. You don't demolish every wall to make a home. You learn which ones carry weight, and you let them hold what they can. Before bed, I walk the hallway with the lights off. The house breathes a low hum in the vents, a tick in the pipes. The open hush of a life that no longer asks for permission. I stop by the office one last time. The framed diploma catches a strip of moonlight. In the glass, I see my reflection layered over that paper, older, steadier mine. The night I stood up from that dinner table and walked out, I thought I was ending something. I was. But endings are doorways in disguise. I switch off the lamp and feel the floor solid under my feet, the kind of solid you only get when you've done the leveling yourself from the back, where no one sees. The house doesn't applaud. It doesn't have to. I hear it anyway. The echo I built steady as a heartbeat. You stayed. You built, you chose. They said my success meant nothing. In the end, it meant I could finally sit at a table where every chair is full of people who matter, and I'm one of them. Have you ever been the invisible one who had to build in silence? Tell me what helped you level your life from the back.